Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
Yeah, and we're excited to be us. You can tell.
Woohoo! Fuck yeah! I'm stoked. I don't know what we're doing today, but I'm fucking thrilled about it.
I know we're kind of at a loss because for the last month we've had like a gamer fuel critique to open the show to,
and now all the game fuel's gone, so I'm like having a sugar crash right now. It's like a month of that fucking way too much sugar, and now my body's completely just without. It's like when Bane loses his like super serum in that shitty Batman movie, and he just turns into a twig.
Yeah. Except for, like, I imagine you were already a twig, so you're just like...
Where it's worse.
Yeah, you're just like an empty pair of jeans and a hollow t-shirt.
You're talking to like just a set of clothes, Ben's clothes. His last remnant.
Yeah, so we're back.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
Yeah.
That's great. That's cool. Keep at it.
I like that. Let's do like fake audience participation where it's like, hey, any before we get started, any questions out there?
Anybody else do heroin here in the crowd tonight?
You
really?
All do.
That
wow.
much, huh?
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that.
There's a buffet table in back. Enjoy.
See, I'm riffing with it's called crowd work, and it's what every comic does who has no fucking idea what to say.
I've always admired that ability, though, to just roll with like the audience stuff or to fill airtime, because that wouldn't be me. I'd be a terrible stand-up. Shocking none of you that have listened to the show before.
I think there's been like 3 stand-ups I've heard in my life where like crowd work was an important part of their set, and they were like genuinely great at it.
Yeah.
And good, like, because these were people who were just naturally funny. There's one guy, I don't know if he does much stand-up anymore, but his name's Ross Noble, and he's a British comic, and he has material, but his mind is so fucking incapable of staying on topic that he'll and his specials are like 3 hours. Because he cannot stay to his script, so he's just on stage for 3 hours just talking to people. And he's genuinely hilarious, but it's the most rambly fucking shit.
I imagine anytime they go to record like a album, like a CD, well, nobody does CDs anymore, but the equivalent of a CD, the like producer probably ready to hang himself, because that's the only time it really matters. If somebody's paying to go see your show and you run over, usually people enjoy that because that's more content. I've never like talked to somebody that went to see a band they like and they're like, it was really good, but they wouldn't quit playing. It's like,
I've actually been that guy a couple of times where I've been like, this was a good show, but I don't care anymore. I'm tired.
The band's up on stage like, what do you say we do one more? And they look out and you're just like tapping your watch like, guys, I got to work in the morning.
Yeah, I'm just like, nah, we're good.
Yeah, that would be me if
good
I did
show, guys. Leave them wanting more. That's the old showman motto. Anywho,
yeah.
Speaking of leaving them wanting more, this is not an essential podcast where we always give you too much.
Too much, right. If you've not listened to the show before, the quick and dirty description of it is that we tell stories every week.
Down and dirty.
Down and dirty. The down and dirty.
DL.
That's the only phrase I can think of right now because I am not a riffing person. Yeah, there's stories. Sometimes they're like fiction. We do a lot of creepypasta. Sometimes they're legends or actual history, just anything we find interesting. Because our hope is if one of us finds it interesting, maybe somebody else will.
And usually we're wrong.
Yeah.
But one day we'll find one that actually captures people's interest.
I'm usually impressed by the end. Like, there's been a lot of topics that I've had. I can't speak from your perspective, where you're like, I don't know how this will go, and then by the end, you're like, that was a fun show. So,
usually the ones I think will be good are the ones where it's like I kind of just tell the story like last week kind of fit that bill, where I was like, I thought that was really interesting, and then I just felt like I just sort of read a Wikipedia on here, and usually we're a little better about that, but
I don't know. We'll see how it goes, because it's my turn this week, and we may have the same thing, because this is another a real thing that happened at some point. I
think that's what we're learning, is that real shit is boring and bad. This is a Creepypasta exclusive show now.
So the Second World War was a pretty big deal at the time.
Yeah. I'm glad that blew over.
In fact, I mean, even today, which is like years later, most of us are still aware that it happened.
Well, there's some doubters.
Back in 1930s, 30s and 40s, whenever that thing conflict occurred, it was hard for like anything else in the news to compete with it. It's just kind of the flavor of the day.
How pissed I would be back then if they'd never talked. If it was like how they talk about Iraq and Afghanistan now, where it's like mainstream news barely mentions it. If you're like in World War II and it's just like, well, like everybody's gone fighting in this thing and we have no idea what's happening.
Yeah, welcome to the evening news. A squirrel in Sheboygan went through the drive-thru and tried to order a pop. Oh, and we dropped some bombs.
10,000 dead in Europe. Also, this little chipmunk, where's he going with that nut?
So, when you think about World War II, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Khaki pants. No.
Mine's baguettes and cheese, because some of the fighting happened in France, and that's all I know about France: baguettes and cheese.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, first thing I think of World War II is Hitler killing himself in the bunker. That's my honest.
It's your happy place.
Yeah, it's like I got to go to the one positive there, which is that fucker ate shit in misery.
Yeah, so there's Hitler's demise. There's Hitler's mustache. It's hard not to think about that.
Which still we're still hunting for. We haven't. Mm-hmm. We got Hitler. We still haven't taken down his mustache yet. It's out there somewhere.
They smuggled it out of the bunker before his suicide, and last I heard, it was in Argentina somewhere.
It was fucked up because they knew they burnt the body, but nobody smelt burnt hair.
Yeah.
Which means it's still out there.
And it also means the rest of his body was hairless, which is
probably true. He was kind of a grubby, like grub-like looking creature. He did look like something you would like take out of a hollowed tree.
Yeah, you're not wrong. So anyway, one of the first 30 or so things that I personally think about in relation to World War II is the invasion at Normandy on D-Day. And also how fortunate it was that Tom Hanks survived to make a movie about it.
He did the beach, and then he fucking and then he did a movie about his own exploits.
Exactly. That's my understanding is Spielberg was like, I need more money. Let's make a World War II movie. And Tom Hanks is like, hey, I did that once. I'll show you guys how it goes.
And Spielberg was like, that's precisely why I'm looking for you.
Mm-hmm. You might not be aware of it, but a lot of planning and preparation goes into fighting a world war. It's not something that the army just wakes up and says, let's go take Normandy back today. At the very least, they wake up and say, maybe next Thursday we can storm Normandy. The Allies decided they should probably practice for the invasion, and that's where today's topic comes from. It was an operation called Exercise Tiger, which kind of makes me wonder.
Exercise Tiger?
Mm-hmm.
Great band name.
It's funny though, because, and I get it, you always hear about these things like Exercise Tiger. It's do you wonder, back in Idaho, were they running practices that they called Exercise Wombat? Do you run out of cool animals and just have to start using sea cucumber? And it does kind of give me like the impression like it is a kind of a cool name until you think how much of a like little league baseball team it makes you sound like.
I'd name them after like Bloodborne bosses, like Operation Vacuous Spider.
There you go. I would respect that more. In an effort to find the most suitable and most British sounding place to practice the landing, practice grounds were set up in an area of Devon known as Slapton Sands. About 3,000 residents, Slaptonianites if you will, were forced to evacuate the area. Wikipedia notes that many of them had never left their town in their entire Slappin' lives. Although, as a side note, the article points out that Slapton Beach is now known as South Hams District. So I couldn't decide if I'd rather be a slapper or a hammer. To be honest, they're both pretty awesome names. Like, you go to the next town over and they're like, oh, here comes one of those hammers.
They decided to combine to form the ultimate masturbatory phrase, slap ham.
Slap hammer.
You slapping your ham in there, boy?
Welcome to Slap Ham. It's not a lot of dates go on at Slap Ham, but it's
slapping
a fun place.
Your ham. We gotta go.
On April 22nd, Exercise Tiger began with 3 days of marshalling and embarkment drills. If you're not sure what that means, don't bother to Google it because it's boring, but also because I'm about to tell you what it means.
How to well, thanks for saving it for the show.
Yes. Basically, it means for 3 days they practice like putting people and stuff places, including loading and unloading the ships. So
it's got to be really fucked up to be like training for something that like you have to know like it is very well gonna get you killed. You know, like to like put that kind of thought into it is like. Here's the safe way to be in a boat, you know. But
that's the thing. If even in the military today, but watching some of the stuff back then, it's like you had to know. There's always that sense of like impending doom. Those soldiers that were puking their guts out in the landing craft, as we saw again from that documentary that was filmed at the time on Saving Private Ryan. But the military also seems to do like a really good job of like the propaganda side of it. Like, okay, boys, this is going to be something, but we're going to kick ass. Like, we're better than them.
I've listened to a lot of, it's weird. Like, you know that VR chat game?
Yeah.
So there's a whole like YouTube category of channels of people just like people get on VR chat and they feel completely open. And they'll just tell like these really personal stories. And a lot of them are former military people and current military people. And the way they talk about it is like, it's not like they don't go into it like thinking like, oh, we're invincible. You know, they go into it with like, it gets drilled into your head so much that like, you're going to kill people and you could get killed. And, and it's just, you go numb to that reality and you just operate mechanically, basically.
That's really cool. I didn't know that, because that's one of the things that, you know, we're known for being serious on this show, but that veterans really do need because that's difficult. I mean, that's common. I had both my grandfathers fought in the war, and neither of them really talked much about it.
It's why, like, you see in movies all the time, like, you know, guys freaking out in moments of combat and stuff, which does happen. I'm sure it does. But like a lot of these people are like, yeah, it's not really until you go back home that it hits you what you were a part of and what happened to you, you know? So.
Yeah. And I'm not going to pretend to even begin to be able to identify with that other than the like idea of, I know myself in most times, fortunately, I have not been in any super, super bad situations of like crisis. But usually it's like your emotional part of your brain, at least for me, shuts off and you just jump into that, like, this is what I need to do mode. And it sounds like that to like the 1,000th degree.
Yeah.
But
like your world, like for the scale of the conflict you're in, like your world becomes very A to B. as far as like what you're doing every day, and it's very task driven and stuff. Like at least that's my read on it. I would never join the fucking military, but
they wouldn't take.
But
me
the
anymore,
stories are interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, the point is the first 3 days of this exercise were mostly that kind of stuff. The kind of stuff that sounds boring. It's extremely important, but it's just like, here's how you get, how we want you guys to get on and off the ships and where the equipment needs to go and how to store the cargo so that you can actually get to it in a timely manner when you need to. Those kind of drills. The first practice assault didn't take place until April 27th. 30,000 troops would be involved, along with 9 large tank landing ships. And I'm not sure if they mean large ships that land regular tanks or regular ships that land large tanks. Doesn't really matter, but I kind of hope it's the later. Like, I just like to picture this ship dropping off this tank that's like 8 times the size of a normal tank.
I was like, it's just adding mass.
Yeah. Yeah, like it doesn't actually operate any better. It's just bigger. H-hour, which apparently stands for hour. Literally, I was like, what is... They kept referencing H-hour, and I've heard it. We played enough military video games and movies and shit. But it made me curious. I'm like, what does H-hour actually stand for? And it literally stands for hour.
H-hour, not to be confused with power hour.
Power hour, right. But it actually means, of course, the time we're going to do the shit was scheduled for 7:30 a.m., which is too early to be fighting wars, but whatever. The P plan was to load the landing crafts after they were actually invading the beach, and then actually invade the beach, to add some sass to the brass, as they probably said at the time. Good old General Eisenhower insisted that the ships experience naval bombardment from support vessels prior to the operation. The thought was they needed to prepare the soldiers for the sights, sounds, and smells of actual combat without, theoretically, exposing them to wounds, maimings, and death of actual combat. And then as the troops landed, they would have friendly soldiers already on the ground firing over their heads, basically from the beach, for the same reasons. But I mostly think it's because at this point, like, everybody had spent 3 days doing like loading and unloading drills, and they all just wanted to like shoot shit. They're like, well, we get to fire our guns. So on the morning of the 27th, a few landing ships got delayed, which is embarrassing as fuck, but also precisely why you have these kind of practice drills. Like, yeah. You're like, oh, we're doing this big scale operation. We need to get everything right. And then the day of the first practice, they're like, well, yeah, half the guys slept in.
Yeah, well, good thing we trained for this, because they all got donuts. They went to the wrong beach.
Yeah. Oh, there were some girls playing volleyball. We got distracted. Sorry, boss. American Admiral.
What the big deal is. You go and we'll meet up with you.
Germans aren't going anywhere.
Just a fucking half platoon storming the beach anyway when the other half isn't there.
And that's like that's exactly how like the business life is. You work, there's like half the people are like, let's get this shit done, and the other half are like, eh.
Yeah.
The American Admiral Don P. Moon, which is, I don't know why they have to list all these people's like full
Don
names.
Pretty Moon.
Pretty Moon. There was like a Sinatra song about that, I think. Pretty Moon.
Yeah, probably. Sinatra, the biggest cop-out, right? A songwriter in the world, because he'll just be like, oh, lit roller. Yeah,
yeah, he had that loud
just looked around his room for shit.
But Don P. Moon decided to delay H-hour for 1 H-hour, bringing the totality of H-hours to 8:30 a.m. Unfortunately, only about half the fleet got that message, because the radio squad apparently also needed some practice. So the result was about exactly what you said. About half of the landing forces landed at 7 a.m., and the other half landed at 8:30 a.m., which is just not what's supposed to happen.
It's like, this only works if half of us die. together, you know?
The bigger problem, aside from it being extremely, embarrassing, was that they had told their naval buddies to fire in the general but not exact direction, and also the Sandy buddies to fire over our heads but totally don't hit us. But they totally did hit them, because the forces on the ground, thinking the landing was still on for 7:30, and then seeing a landing at 7:30, began doing exactly what they were supposed to and firing over their heads, which is fine enough when your head is where it's supposed to be, but it's less fine when your head is way back where it's not supposed to be, because that's exactly where the bullets and stuff tend to land. So, like, as the trailing ships, they're like, okay, guys, we're coming. Oh, fuck, they're firing at us.
In Call of Duty, this is what we call a staggered push, and it's always a bad decision. It always goes poorly.
Even when it's your own people shooting at you.
Yep.
I mean...
Oh, yeah, friendly fire
conveniently
doesn't
for
give a
the
shit.
Yeah, no. So conveniently for the officials in charge, these drills were so top secret, given the importance of the actual landing plans, that many people never actually heard about this little faux pas, this little whoopsie. But that means the exact number of friendly fire casualties was kind of easy to sweep under the rug. Inconveniently for the officials in charge, this wasn't the last oopsie of the week. The job of one of the naval security detachments for the exercise was to keep an eye on the nearby German U-boat base and make sure that those rascals didn't give them any trouble while they were practicing. Which is weird to me that you'd be practicing at a base where there existed a nearby U-boat base. But I guess the problem is that France and England aren't terribly far apart from each other.
Hey, we're working on something. You guys just stay put, all right?
That's
Until
extremely localized thunder that you hear, and these are all fishing vessels. Like, just...
We're not shooting our own over here. We're just looking for paper clips.
That's the funny part. I didn't even think about that, because the first day of the practice assault, they managed to do just that. They kept an eye on the U-boat base and no problems. But now that I think about it, it's what you just said. The Germans probably saw everything going on. They're like,
it seems like they're attacking their own.
Like, they're like, should we go attack? It's like, no, they got it under control.
I think they raided the wrong beach and defended the wrong beach.
Which we've done a podcast topic about that kind of too, but what they hadn't, nay, what they could not have possibly planned for, was for the possibility that the Germans might wait until, say, midnight and launch 9 boats in their direction under the cover of darkness.
Yeah.
So on the 28th, at exactly midnight, those sneaky submarines came across 8 of those LTS, the large tank landing ships, and one of the 2 anti-submarine, I put destroyer, they were corvette ships that were supposed to be escorting them. Apparently, the second destroyer, or corvette, had collided with one of the other landing ships at some point, taking damage which required them to break off and head to port for a patch and go.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Right.
God damn.
So being a British ship, the communications regarding this were sent over British frequencies.
Quick interruption here. Big picture. Has there ever been a more war-happy nation than America that has been this incompetent at war?
Hey, now, in fairness, we're multiplying America's incompetence by Britain's incompetence, and that's this is the result.
But just like the fact that, I would totally be back home. Just like, we should have never gotten that war. We're not good at this. For a nation that started with war, we're very bad at it.
Yeah. It's funny because it puts a movie like Stripes, if you've seen that. It's classic, but it's old. In perspective, where you're like, oh, this is a comedy. You're like, no, that's basically war.
Well,
like,
I mean,
like a Hot Shots or Hot Shots
American War. If you can get past the fucking horror, it's very funny.
So anyway, apparently at some point the one ship collided with another ship, and they're like, well, fuck, we got to go fix this. We're breaking off. And they broadcasted that, but it was a British ship, and it went over British frequencies. Americans, who were presumably sick of all the British accents, had been using their own frequency.
They keep saying crikey and shit. I need baseball.
Yeah, pip pip cheerio, fuck that. We're going to our own channel. So anyway, the Americans didn't know that one of the ships had to break off until it was too late. Of course, the Germans took up positions and opened fire on the Allied ships. This happened about 2 o'clock in the morning. The assault lasted about an hour and a half before the German ships retreated. By the end of that, one of these LTS boats had caught fire, but the crew were able to contain it and get back to shore for repairs. 13 soldiers were killed. Another was torpedoed and sunk, with the loss of 202 sailors. A third took damage from more friendly fire when a German U-boat maneuvered between it and another friendly ship, and the two idiots were firing.
This is just a team wipe, dude.
Yeah. That's why it's like friendly fire, and then it said, yeah, a U-boat went between the two of them. And it's like, well, that's the oldest move in the book if you're a cartoon. But, these Germans had to be, living it up. And a fourth LTS sank basically immediately after being torpedoed. That was the saddest one. It was 6 minutes from being hit to sinking, which resulted in the loss of life of 424 of their crew. So, and I didn't put it in my notes. I don't know why, because it's kind of an important figure. The official figures for the losses between the friendly fires during practice and then the German attack afterwards were between 700 and 800 people, which I guess if you're the military out of 30,000, you're like,
no, there's no real sugarcoating that from a group that was in a training exercise. That is a devastating level of casualties. How the fuck do you lose that many people?
Especially a training exercise leading up to what would be and remains the most pivotal, other than the horrendous but dropping of the atom bombs in Japan. But this is probably the most pivotal point in the war, the D-Day invasion, at least as the way it's taught. And we know there's a lot of revisionism in there.
Well, as far as America's role in the war, it's one of the sticking points.
Yeah. And they knew it was going to be. And this was their okay, this has to go. This is super important. If we don't win this, we're fucked. Let's practice it.
We gotta do everything opposite of how we've practiced this.
And I like to think of it, and I know especially at the time they didn't have the satellites and stuff, but I love to picture Eisenhower up on a big platform watching why are our boats bouncing off each other? Why are they shooting at each other? What the fuck is going on? Will somebody do something about those U-boats? Don't shoot at it between you. And he's just sitting there drinking fuck, we're screwed.
Just like how we watch our fucking sports teams every year. It's right. Don't fucking do... Oh, Jesus.
So when Eisenhower learned of the attacks and everything else, he was very unhappy indeed. But his chief concern was the fact that 10 officers with top clearance and knowledge of the planned invasion were missing. Of course, because it's we lost 700 men. Oh no, have our plans been discovered? Which I get, it sounds callous, but at the same time, you'd be shitting yourself when the most top secret documents are unaccounted for. In fact, he was so worried about it that he was going to call off the whole, D-Day invasion unless they could recover the 10 bodies of the missing officers and their documents, which fortunately they were clearly able to do because we clearly did not cancel D-Day.
Well, this show, we're not going to cancel it. Look at all this prep we did.
Well, my thoughts are, at this point, they're well, that didn't go well. But fuck it, we gotta go.
In for a penny, in for a pound. Well, let's hit it.
That said, they did find the none of the guys were captured. Of course, they all just died in the bumbling, and their documents were recovered safely. But the Germans had figured out that the Allies were at least nearing readiness for an invasion, because the U-boats had noticed that their initial torpedoes had missed, and had smartly surmised that the ships they'd encountered had extremely shallow drafts, hulls. They were able to tell, like, hey, there's not a lot of ship in the actual water part. These are landing vessels, which they were correct. It's even theorized that Hitler had figured out that they may, well, and I'm sure it wasn't Hitler, but Hitler had been informed that they were probably planning to invade at Utah Beach by recognizing the similarities between it and Slapton, which is exactly why Slapton was chosen, of course. It was a beach that they could find that was closest to what they would encounter.
I would make them invade Snake Island, because nothing harder than that.
Utah Beach had been ordered to be fortified in the month following Exercise Tiger. That's what makes people think, like, hey, they probably looked at this and were like, well, this might be a good idea to move more stuff here.
Yeah.
If you're astute enough, you may have noticed that, but probably not, because I wouldn't have noticed. The training involved 9 of these giant LTS ships, but the convoy that was attacked only had 8. Well, that's because one of the LTS ships had been damaged the day prior during the exercises, and it was at shore being repaired, which is great news for the ship, but potentially bad news, as they think that some or all of her crew may have been aboard that one that sank like instantly, which would mean that even more people died than officially calculated. Like I said, one of the most terrible parts of all this was that it was, like I said, such a top secret mission, that there intentionally wasn't a lot of records kept.
Such a top secret mission that, like, Germany figured out, like, right away. Like, hey, I think they're trying to do this.
Right. Yeah, well, it's like a lot of things. The top secret part really only served to cover up the incompetence of them to their own people.
The only thing we kept secret was how fucking badly we botched it.
So the practice was not a total bust, unless you were, of course, like one of the people that died, or a friend and family member of a person who died. Then it was probably, you'd probably deem that a very bad outcome. But there were a number of changes that came about after learning that they apparently didn't really know what the hell they were doing. So, for starters, the British and the American radio frequencies were standardized so that they could, talk to each other. Like, it's weird to me that they needed this practice to be like, wait a minute, we should probably be communicating here. But at the same time, I can kind of picture it, because we know the hubris and the egos that go into the military stuff. And so I can picture the Americans being like, we don't want the Brits to have access to our communications. And I can picture the British being like, we don't want those Americans to have access to our communications. We'll tell them what they need to know. And then afterwards they're like, well, yeah, I guess we should work together here.
I guess it is a world war.
Sailors were given better life vest training, which is the most corporate thing I've ever heard in my life. It's like, look, yeah, we know some people died, but it's really on you. You weren't using your life vest correctly. So let's make you go through some life vest training.
Use your life vest to block the projectiles that will be shot at you repeatedly.
To qualify that with something that's funny, but in the most terrible possible way. What they're really talking about here is one of the problems that they had when these boats got attacked was that, you ended up with a lot of sailors in the sea, and it was cold, and that's a condition where a lot of people end up drowning anyway. But they had, naturally, a lot of them had put their life preserver ring thing, it's basically not that different than what you picture today, where you put it on and pull the cord and it blows up and it's like the shape of a duck or whatever.
Yep. Exactly.
They put them around their waist because when you're wearing a giant fucking pack full of equipment, that was about the only place you could actually get the ring on. The problem was when you put said ring around your waist with a giant heavy backpack and jumped in the water, what tended to happen is you'd flip upside down and the ring would keep you from being able to turn back around. So basically the life preserver would keep you afloat, but also drown you. And so they were like, we should probably revisit this. But I like the way it was worded, because it was like, you guys aren't using this correctly. And it's like, yeah, thanks, assholes. Also, the third and final bullet point that came out of all of this was that they decided to add some small recovery vessels to the actual invasion plan, who were to scout the water for survivors and maybe, like rescue them. Like, I think I would have quit the army after learning that this wasn't part of the original plan. Well, this went terribly in practice. Maybe we should actually try to save you guys once you're in the water. It's like, yes, please. Like, when they originally drafted it up, I guess the plan was like, yeah, the guys that fall off, they'll bob around out there. We'll get to them eventually. Like, we assume they'll blow up on shore. So that was Exercise Tiger, which became one of my favorite, World War II stories from the, horrible hilarity, just incompetent file. But I did make a note here to point out that the incompetence wasn't all us. During that attack, when the U-boats, came and sank a couple ships and whatever, 2 of the 9 U-boats had to leave almost immediately after colliding with each other as well. So the moral of the story is we play all these video games and see all these movies, and war is always this highly orchestrated, specialist, kick-ass SEAL team type. That's not war at all. Nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. It's just attack, and everybody runs around in circles firing guns until one side dies or gives up. But
it's like that fight scene in Anchorman where Steve Carell's character's just running around with a grenade, screaming.
Right. Which makes you think all of this chaos and confusion and self-defeat was during a practice exercise. What the hell? How did this actual invasion work?
One thing the films got right was it was a fucking nightmare.
Yes.
And it took a lot of grit to turn that into a win somehow, but definitely not one that you can't read about the fucking Normandy invasion and be like, wow, what a great time.
No.
And in fucking military history, it was pure brute force.
Exactly. I was going to say, it's one of the shining examples that mostly in war, we try to play up the tactics and the being more technologically advanced than your opponent and all that kind of stuff. And all that, of course, is true. But at the end of the day, soldiers are cogs, and a lot of war is won by just throwing as many bodies at something as you can and hoping that your body's overwhelmed the other. And it's not necessarily a numbers thing, but it's a
like the great military moments of and I mean, war is awful no matter what. So I say great as in terms of impressive, but right. Those great moments of somebody was outnumbered and somehow turned the environment to their advantage or something. Those things certainly happen, but a lot of your best military minds won 90% of their battles just because they had the numbers to do so, and they put them in the right spots. But it's also it's fodder, it's soldiers have ammo and soldiers are also ammo.
Right. They're an expendable currency to win the war. And when I say expendable, you can argue, again, I'm not military, I've not fought in it, so I'm not the most qualified person to talk about it from an experience standpoint. Most military leaders, at least on the ground level, aren't willing to, they're not thinking, okay, well, we're going to half die, but that's okay with me. Their goal on a personal level, your goal is certainly to have 0 people die. But like you said, by that point, you've got it drilled into you, and it's just the reality of the situation that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Although you rely on the individual's desire to also stay alive, and that's why some of these people have been able to overcome as much as they did, because there's a lot to be said for your desire to not die. But yeah, I mean, I came across this. There's a couple examples that I've had in my notes about friendly fire, and there's nothing. This will sound the complete wrong way when I say nothing funnier to me than friendly, because it's not. For people died, so I don't mean it funny like ha ha ha. I'm glad that happened, but it's like the most like how could you let that happen thing in military.
Yeah.
And it all stems back to this idea, and it's the most Eisenhower thing I've ever heard, where it's like, we're going to practice, but let's use live rounds, because they need to be battle hardened.
You need to know what the fuck this will feel like when one of your own shoot you.
This way, when you die at Normandy, you'll know what it was like to die during practice. It's like, sir, they can only die once. What? Ah, fuck.
Now you need to really know what it's like when I forget to turn the safety off and I put one in your back.
Right.
You know, it's...
How would it... And I get, because the way that this all went down, you wouldn't know, but how would you feel if you were those forces on the beach that were just like doing what you thought you were supposed to do, and they're like, oh, by the way, you guys shot the fuck out of your own guys? It's like, oh, cool.
I would have immediately been defensive, and I would have been like, they shouldn't have been late.
I knew what we were doing.
I would have immediately spun it to be their fault. It's like...
You play it off like you meant to shoot them. You're like, those assholes were making me work overtime.
I would write what starts as like really somber apology letters to the family, and by paragraph like 2 or 3, it's like, but if he had fucking been on time and set his alarm right.
At the end of the day, alcoholism is what killed your son, not my bullet. With all due
respect, if you taught your fucking kid anything about being punctual, I'm sorry, ma'am. I know this is a tough time for you. I'm just saying you can't sue.
The only way it would have been better is if I had read the phrase that, like, the real reason half the ships were delayed is to be like, well, the British ships were on metric time and the American ships were on imperial time or something like that.
Nobody knew what the fuck anything meant anymore, and time became an illusion.
Right. But... yeah, the moral of the story, kids, is practice is for suckers. It'll just get you killed. Just assume you can do anything and give it your all.
Yeah. And do your best. Moral of Normandy, do your best.
Call it Exercise Tony the Tiger. Not great.
Practice, practice, practice. Unless that leads to hundreds upon hundreds of deaths, then you should probably give it up.
Can you imagine being the lower officer that had to deliver the news to Eisenhower? Like, he's like, oh, Dwight, I'm glad you're here. Come on in. How'd it go? How'd it go? He's like, well,
I'm genuinely amazed the facts came out at all. Like,
oh yeah,
because if I was commanding officer there, I'd be like, okay, we got to blow up all of these planes or all these ships and say the Germans did it, and just just turn it all into one big, like, yeah, they fuck bombed us and all of our stuff's gone. Sorry.
Private Thompson, how'd it go? Well, sir, you know how we, started with like 9 ships? Well, we got 3 left.
Not sure what you want to do from here, sir.
I think we might have hit some German U-boats and taken them out, so that's good.
There was also there were at least a few points where we shot ourselves.
So, yeah, don't worry, we didn't let those Germans kill us. No, sir.
I hope you're not mad, Mr. President.
Yeah, I mean it's all in how you word it. Like I said, it's like out of the 9, we've got I think it was 4 that went down during the
good
U-boat
news.
attack.
We still have 3 ships to do this.
4. They had 4. That's an extra ship.
Yeah.
Well, but they were, yeah. Okay. So 9 of our LTSs, 4 of them survived. And out of the 2 Corvettes, 1 of them made it back in one piece. Yeah. And, you know how those 30,000 soldiers went out there? Well, 29,300 and some came back. Like, that's pretty good, right?
Now, I'm not gonna doll it all up for you, sir, but, there's even with these advantages, the Germans probably know what we're about to do. So.
Yeah. They didn't get it. Don't worry. They didn't get their hands on any of our plans. They just watched everything we did the whole time.
And really, to overflow this glass, not just half full, but if there's a real positive that came out of this is now all of our boys know how important it is to set your alarm. So and that kind of info in time of war, priceless.
Oh, and we'll teach them how to use those life preservers. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, the rubber ducky, you pull the bill, puffs right up, and that's been a big hit with them.
I hate to ask you anything in this time of uncertainty, but can we get some like rescue boats
just
for the
in
operation?
Case
just
none
in
of
case.
this works, sir. How's that bomb thing going? Because we might need it. That's really, when you think about the scale of that conflict, that's really like the darkest humor.
Well, yeah. I know that's the thing is like I liked this topic, but you don't want to whitewash the fact that A, it's war, and B, people died. I mean, there's people that didn't come home because of these stupid mistakes.
Right.
But
I mean, we have to live in America every day, and if we can't like laugh about how awful America is at a lot of shit, you won't survive. You got to be able to laugh at this.
I did love that, like I said, that out of all of it, because the American troops fucked up, the British troops fucked up. I mean, it was pretty much equal fuckery on the American and the British, just the whole Allied forces. But then also the German U-boats to like run into each other too.
Yeah.
It's like nobody. It's good that we got this practice war in before the actual war, I guess. Like. That's why it's a preseason game. Is what it is. It's not a practice drill. It's preseason scrimmage.
Except, much like scrimmages, people get injured.
Yeah.
Torn ACLs for everybody. Anyway, I think that's it, right? We're out.
Yeah,
we're done.
We're out.
All right.
That's in 40 some minutes is more exercise than I'm used to. So
there you go.
Goodbye, exercise tiger.
Yeah. Exercise tiger. Going dark.
Quit firing, damn it.